Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and I'm so glad you're watching today. A big welcome to those who are here for the first time, and I hope it won't be your last. Today, I've decided to tell you a story about what can happen on a luxury cruise ship. I'm sure you all know the famous stories of shipwrecks like the Costa Concordia, the sinking of the Titanic, or people mysteriously vanishing from Royal Caribbean ships. But today, I chose a different kind of story. A story about what happens when a mechanical failure occurs, where everyone survives, and at first glance, it seems like nothing major happened. It's a story about how a single breakdown can trigger a massive chain reaction and cause incredible trauma for the passengers. If you enjoy my storytelling, I'd be very grateful for a like, share, and of course, a subscribe. On a beautiful day in February 2013, a cruise ship called the Carnival Triumph set sail from the port of Mobile, Alabama, for what was supposed to be a 4-day cruise, including a stop in Mexico. There were about 3,000 passengers and 1,000 crew members on board. The ship was built by Fincantieri at the Monfalcone shipyard in northern Italy. It is 272.3 meters long and 35.5 meters wide. It features a diesel-electric propulsion system where the main generators supply electricity for all onboard functions, from the propulsion motors to hotel systems like air conditioning and lighting. Its power plant consists of 6 diesel generator sets. Now, if you're wondering why I'm telling you these technical specs, it's so you have a clear picture of how the ship works when the story unfolds later. The passengers were incredibly excited about the cruise. They were having fun, relaxing, dancing, and enjoying the journey. The ship had a casino, a gym, a theatre, bars, swimming pools, and plenty of other attractions. Among the passengers were, for example, newlyweds on a short honeymoon, girls on a bachelorette party, or a father and daughter who hadn't seen each other in a long time and took a trip together. For the first 2 days, the cruise went exactly as planned. The weather was beautiful and the passengers were happy. On the 3rd day, the ship stopped at a port in Mexico where passengers had a few hours to have fun or go shopping, and then the ship headed back toward Alabama. But on the 4th day, February 10th, everything went completely wrong. At 5:30 in the morning, an alarm blared from the ship's loudspeakers. The crew jumped into action and rushed to their stations, while the passengers began to panic, fearing the ship was sinking, and ran up to the deck. However, some passengers had completely ignored the mandatory safety drill held earlier because they thought it was useless. As a result, they had no idea what to do or where to run in an emergency. Those who knew ran to their designated muster stations. Those who didn't just ran aimlessly to the top deck. Everyone on deck could see thick smoke billowing from the ship. "The ship is on fire!" they panicked. The smoke was indeed caused by a fire in the aft engine room. Fortunately, the fire suppression system successfully extinguished the flames, and no one was hurt. There were 0 injuries. At that point, everything was still working as it should. The cruise director, Jen, whose job among other things was to communicate with the passengers, went to see the captain to get more information so she could update everyone. The captain told her that one of the 6 generators had caught fire, but the fire was out, and there was no need to worry because they still had 5 left. So, Jen told the passengers that everything was fine, that they didn't need to worry because everything was under control, and they could leave the muster stations. The passengers calmed down, dispersed, and went back to having fun or trying to catch up on sleep. But suddenly, all the lights went out, and the ship was plunged into total darkness. Panic broke out again, but Jen calmed them down, saying it would be fine. Jen knew this wasn't the first blackout to ever happen, and once the generator cooled down, the engineers would fix the issue and everything would be back to normal. She reassured the passengers and told them to wait. So they waited. However, the chief engineer later discovered that the fire had completely burned and melted all the wiring and electrical cables, meaning they would never be able to restore power. And that meant they couldn't restart the engines either. When there is no electricity, there is nothing. The ship cannot be steered, and nothing works. When the passengers realized this, they tried to call their loved ones, but there was no signal, and the Wi-Fi was down too. Eventually, they managed to start the backup emergency generators, but their power could only cover a small fraction of the ship. The ship was just drifting on the water, and since it couldn't be steered, the current slowly carried it away. Fortunately, they had a satellite phone on board, so the captain called for help. Around 8 a.m., the crew realized that neither the toilets nor the water supply were working. What now? The crew put their heads together. They thought about peeing over the railing, but that was only safe for men. Women could easily fall overboard. In the end, Jen told the passengers to pee in the showers. But what about the other, bigger need? Eventually, the crew handed out plastic hazardous waste bags. Passengers were supposed to do their business in the bag, tie it up, and leave it in the hallway trash cans, with the crew promising to clean them out regularly. But for that to work, you shouldn't have pampered Americans on board. Almost everyone refused to poop in a bag. Some of them even resorted to swallowing Imodium just to avoid having to go at all. I know it's no luxury to do your business in a bag, but in an emergency, is it really that big of a sacrifice? I mean, how many times a day do you even go? On Netflix, there is a documentary about this cruise titled The Infamous Poop Cruise, and when I saw the passengers' reactions to the bags, I could only shake my head in disbelief. One passenger, for instance, wasn't ashamed to tell the Netflix audience that she got drunk like a pig on board until she couldn't walk, but pooping in a bag was where she drew the line. Well, I guess we all have different priorities. Even though the emergency lights were on, passengers walking to the showers also used the lights from their life jackets, which react to water and start flashing. The crew also partially managed to get at least cold water running. The plan was to wait for tugboats to tow them to shore. The tugs were supposed to arrive around 12 p.m. the next day. Because of this, passengers went to sleep out on the open deck just to get some fresh air, since the air conditioning wasn't working. Meanwhile, the current kept drifting the ship further and further away. The passengers had no idea and slept peacefully. In the morning, the head chef faced a massive problem: what to feed the people. The fridges, freezers, and stoves weren't working. In the end, he prepared sandwiches from whatever hadn't spoiled yet and pulled out dry foods like biscuits, cookies, and things like that. The passengers turned their noses up at it. They couldn't comprehend how there could be an abundance of food before, and today there was barely anything to eat. I gasped at this too. What is so hard to understand about there being no food when there is no electricity? Yet everyone still tried to hoard as much food as possible for themselves. Why? They were supposed to be back on land in a few hours anyway. One crew member, originally from Russia, was quite amused by the whole situation. She thought to herself that at least the Americans would finally see what it's like to live in the conditions she grew up in. A bit spiteful, but on one hand, I get her. No one can truly imagine how terrible it was, and still is, in Russia. I won't get into that too deeply right now, but if you're interested in what life looked like in Russia, or rather the USSR, check out my other video where I talk about it in detail. You can find the link in the description. Just as a fun fact, in the 1980s, a family could afford meat only once a week, and dairy products were practically unknown. But enough advertising. Let's get back to the story. Meanwhile, passengers took bed sheets and built makeshift tents on the deck to shield themselves from the scorching sun. Later, another cruise ship passed by and stopped for a moment to deliver some food supplies and take on a passenger who urgently needed kidney dialysis. However, not everyone could transfer to the other ship. Technically, it would have been way too complicated. By the time they successfully moved thousands of passengers, the tugboats would have already been there. The people on the other ship were taking photos of the Carnival Triumph, partying and dancing. The Triumph passengers couldn't understand it. It probably didn't occur to them that the people on the other ship had no idea they were in trouble. The good news, though, was that thanks to the second ship, they caught a Wi-Fi signal, so they could finally call their families to tell them what they, poor things, were going through. Noon came, and a call from headquarters changed everything. They had to alter the plan. The ship had drifted by 100 nautical miles. 1 nautical mile is 1,852 meters. In practice, this meant the ordeal would be extended by perhaps 3 more days. They had to wait for massive ocean-going tugboats that could operate in open waters to tow them to port. There aren't many tugs like that, and they don't sail very fast. This was obviously a massive shock to the passengers, but what could they do? And how did the toilets look in the meantime? Well, most of the passengers ignored the rules and used the broken toilets anyway. They just covered it with toilet paper and kept going. As the head chef later put it, it looked like a bizarre human lasagna. Bags were out of the question for them. Then someone from the staff had the bright idea to give the passengers free alcohol to cheer them up. The director, Jen, was horrified. Are they serious? Unfortunately, they were. People did have fun, but they also got wasted. They started peeing over the railing and even throwing full poop bags over the side. So people on the lower decks occasionally got hit. I really won't go into the nasty details. And remember that newborn married couple I mentioned? Those two were doing it right on a lounge chair on the deck, and they certainly weren't the only ones. Fights and brawls started breaking out too, all while the ship was still helplessly drifting. On the day of liberation, around 3 p.m., the tugboats finally arrived. The passengers cheered, but it was premature. To make matters worse, one of the tow lines snapped, and due to the tension, the ship violently tilted. Think about it. It's like when you're playing tug of war, the rope snaps, and you fall backward. Plus, as a bonus, the weather turned terrible, and it started pouring rain. The tilt caused the showers, toilets, and other sewage pipes to overflow. Anyone who wasn't on the top deck was wading through raw sewage and a horrific stench. It was impossible to stay below deck anymore. Helicopters carrying journalists appeared overhead, securing a massive scoop. On land, relatives and friends were terrified for their loved ones. Some even drove to Alabama to meet them. On top of the sheer discomfort, the passengers faced serious health risks from the waste. Feces contained pathogenic bacteria like E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella, Campylobacter, or dysentery. The passengers were horrified and disgusted. But hey, who actually created that sewage and refused to follow the staff's instructions? If they had used the bags, nothing would have been floating around, because the crew was truly cleaning as hard as they could. In any case, nothing more could be done, and they had to wait until the tugs brought the ship into the port in Alabama. When they finally docked, it still wasn't over, because the deboarding process alone took over 5 hours. I don't even want to imagine how hard the crew had to work to keep everyone calm, so they wouldn't push and would exit orderly. Personally, I think the crew felt a much bigger sense of relief than the passengers, because I wouldn't wish what they had to endure from the moment of the breakdown until the very end on anyone. In the end, everything turned out relatively well. Everyone survived, no one was seriously injured, and all it took was a very thorough shower. The passengers wanted to sue the company, but they were out of luck. The company's lawyer set them straight, explaining that buying a ticket does not guarantee a safe voyage, food, or hygienic conditions. The cruise commercials didn't mention this, of course, but it was written somewhere. I couldn't find out exactly where, whether in some fine print in a brochure or on the ticket itself. Over time, it came to light that this wasn't the company's only failure. In the previous 2 years, they had a total of 9 fires on their other ships as well. The company spent about $115 million to clean and repair the ship and renamed it the Carnival Sunrise. The passengers were refunded their ticket fares and offered another cruise for free. But I highly doubt anyone took them up on that offer. What about you? If something similar happened to you, would you take another free ride? And what about the bags? Would you find it too disgusting? Let me know in the comments. Personally, I can say it wouldn't gross me out, and I'd gladly take another free ride. After all, they say lightning never strikes the same place twice. As I said at the beginning, I'll be grateful for every like, subscribe, and share. Sharing helps me the most. And if you enjoy my videos, hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next one. If you'd like to support me even more, you can buy me a coffee on Buy Me a Coffee. When you go there, don't worry, the page automatically suggests amounts you can choose from, but you can ignore that and enter whatever amount you like. The link is in the description. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Bye!